the ballot box, and times they are changing.
The Honourable Phil Goff.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. This bill can't possibly go through under the title that's set out in Clause 1 of the bill. The title that it's given is the Social Housing Reform Bill. Now, we've all gone to school. We know what the word reform means. It means to make better, to improve, to make more effective, to make more capable of delivering the results that ordinary working families need. And there's not a member in this House, not even a member on that side of the House, that believes for a moment that that bill carries out that purpose. It's a total misrepresentation. And God knows, Mr Chairman, that this House does need a social housing reform bill. I just want to take 1 minute of your time to read out this commentary that I picked up from one of my local papers. It's actually from the electorate for the member for Hunua. And this commentator talks about desperate families, 2, sometimes 3 families, sharing a small house, usually in South Auckland, with the kids suffering from inadequate food, poor clothing and often poor health, a direct result of overcrowding and rents consuming half an average wage. Do you know who that commentator was, Mr Speaker? Do you know who it was? It's Don Brash. That's what Don Brash, the one-time leader of the National Party and the one-time leader of the ACT Party, is saying in a publication in Andrew Bailey's electorate. And that's from just 2 weeks ago. Mr Speaker, I happen to agree with Don Brash in his description of the housing crisis that faces New Zealanders at the moment. A housing crisis that doesn't, for the first time, just affect the people at the bottom of the heap. This is a housing crisis that affects a lot of ordinary working New Zealanders who desperately hoped in this budget and in legislation under this sort of title might have been given a decent break to get a decent roof over their heads and to bring their kids up with a chance in life. But what we have seen, Mr Chairman, is rents going up 6 times the rate of inflation in the last year in the City of Auckland. 6 times the rate of inflation. Rents have gone up on average by $1,300 a year in Auckland in the last year, $25 a week. More, it would take up the whole of the extra benefit given to vulnerable families who are on a benefit. And it's affecting other New Zealanders as well. The price of a house in Auckland went up by $103,000 last year. 1 year, $103,000. That is a 15% rise, and that's putting pressure on those who are renting, because people cannot afford to buy their own home, and those that would normally have been able to afford to buy their own home are now competing with the most vulnerable for the rental housing that's available. A social housing reform bill, Mr Chairman, would have addressed the problems of a housing shortage and housing affordability in Auckland that is now reaching crisis proportions. The National Party may have its head down, but even its former leader, Don Brash, spoke the truth about the nature of that crisis. So what have we got from this bill that will help? Is this bill and this title about the government stepping up to meet its responsibility? No, it's about the government opting out of its responsibility by facilitating the selling off of social housing to the private sector. They've cut social housing, 1,600 fewer state houses in their last term in government, and now they're selling off a couple of thousand, not to the Salvation Army that Bill English used to talk about, the lovely Salvation Army who would look after people, but to private developers and to private landlords. That does not solve the housing crisis, Mr Chairman. This is not a social housing reform bill. This is a bill to privatise social housing, to gut Housing New Zealand and its ability to do the job that our forebears 80 years ago in this House this year set up to provide state housing so that every child in New Zealand had the chance for a decent life because they had a stable, secure, affordable home warm and healthy to enable them to have good health, good education and a better life. That is what reform is about. This bill does the opposite.
I call Stuart Smith.
Mr. Chair, I move that the question be now put.
No. Members, the time has come to suspend the House for the dinner break. The lunch break, and the House will resume at 2 p.m.